So, Constance, when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I was raised to be a ballerina, but I really wanted to be a horse trainer. Well, I probably wanted to be a ballerina first before I realized that there was such a thing as a horse trainer. So I did actually grow up to become a horse trainer, and then various things led me to go back to dance in my mid-20s, and I did have a sort of mini career as a modern dancer here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So now I teach the Alexander technique, which is very compatible with both dance and horses. So that's a kind of synchronicity in my life.
So how did you get exposed to the Alexander technique?
The first artistic director that I danced with, her name is Anne Bluethenthal, and she has a company, Anne Bluethenthal and Dancers. She wanted me to take Alexander lessons. Not so much for pain, although I was dealing with chronic back pain at the time, but more artistically. So I had habits that a ballet dancer would have, and so my training as a child was so ballet-oriented that I never really undid those habits, even in my modern dance training. So I took Alexander lessons not from her, but from another teacher, and slowly but surely changed my way of moving. So that's so it was both artistic and pain related. Are you there?
And what were you? What were your first lessons like? Was it a natural affinity for you, or were they a challenge?
Well, I think I'm pretty common in that I really loved my lessons, but I did not know what was going on. And I never thought of not going, not only because I wanted to do well for Anne and do what she thought was good for me, but because I really could tell there was something going on that was really, really good for me, but it was so far away from who I was at the time that I couldn't really access much of it, I guess.
And
so
was there a time?
My first lessons were with a lovely woman, Nora Nussbaum, and she worked with me in a very traditional way. I would say the Carrington way of working. Lots of table work and chair work, but we would do things sometimes like vacuuming and some activities, onion chopping in the kitchen and things like that, where I'd say, but my back always hurts whenever whatever it was. So we did some dance, sort of simple dance moves also. So I would say she definitely did some activity work.
And was there a time when a green light went off in your head and you said, oh, I love this?
Well, the love of it was kind of all mixed up with dancing and with Anne, and then just another serendipitous thing is another dance company that I danced with. The artistic director was also an Alexander teacher. So there was a lot of Alexander technique influence in my life. It did not really occur to me to become an Alexander teacher because I didn't really want to have another starving artist job after being a horse trainer and after being a dancer. When I decided to go back to school and finish a degree, I decided against going to sort of another independent professional artsy thing. So it didn't occur to me that I would go do this as a career until much later. Although I did just sort of want to be Anne Bluethenthal. So I just wanted to have her life. I wanted to have, her what I saw as peace and serenity, inner peace and serenity, and a way of dealing with the world that was lovely and loving, and less pushing and striving and the sort of attacking, which is how I dealt with things at the time.
And what convinced you finally to train to become a teacher?
Well, it was a little bit more of a, let's see, I usually don't say this publicly, so I don't know if we can edit.
Don't say anything. I prefer don't say anything that you'd need to edit.
Okay. Well, I had what I guess we could call a nervous breakdown in my sort of in the middle of an MA program that I was doing at Mills College to go in to be an English teacher, which I thought was not a starving artist job. But at some point I realized that too was going to be another starving artist job, especially here in the Bay Area, and that I really didn't like the academic world. And I just sort of dropped out of everything and wasn't dancing, didn't go to school. I was just having a severe depression. And during that time, I came to the realization that if I'm going to stay, alive and in the world, I'm going to need to do something that's going to be good for me and something that I'm going to want to do. Something that would lead me toward more healing and away from suffering. And the Alexander technique was just so obvious. It was just the obvious thing to do, even though it was, again, a starving artist job. I just felt like, well, that's the thing that's going to help me the most. So that's what I did. I just entered the school, and thank God that was the right choice. I mean, I really did grow and heal a lot during my training, and it took me 4 years to do my training because I was working, trying to make enough money to pay for the training and, rent and all of that. But I think actually that was good for me too, that I was there in the midst of that safety net for 4 years. So.
Aside from the financial challenges, were there any major challenges that you had to overcome in your training?
I would say no. I would say in our training, which was, I went to the ATISF, which is Frank Ottiwell School in San Francisco, and we had 5 regular teachers, or 6 actually, regular teachers, and they were some very different from the others, from all different lineages, and some people have a really hard time with that. I think that was really good for me. So I wouldn't say, I would say yes, it was a challenge, but I think it was a really good challenge to have. Making sense of all the different teachers' styles, and even when they seem to say opposite things, there was enough space, enough room to, I guess, just let that be in the air. These what seemed like opposites to many of us, which turned out to not be opposite. And maybe they were opposite things at different times. It's all very paradoxical. So, but overall, I had a great experience. Overall, I had a really great experience during my training.
What for you was the relationship between the release of unnecessary tension and the emotions?
I'm sorry, can you ask the question again? What?
Yes. Was there a connection during your training between the release of unnecessary tension and the emotions?
A connection, of course, yes. Yes, of course. I think there often is in Alexander lessons, and especially with a teacher who's open to that. So I think that if the teacher and the student are both open to working in the emotional realm, there's a lot of great work that can be done there. And certainly in a training school, you kind of have to, trainers kind of have to be open to that to a certain extent. And so I think that things come up as you learn to soften and undo and just even release some basic muscular tension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think should be the relationship between Alexander technique and psychotherapy?
Should be the relationship? Is that the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know I'm going to say anything should be this or that, but I think it would be great if more psychotherapists had an understanding of somatic work in general, and particularly the non-doing way of the Alexander technique. And I wish, I guess, that Alexander teachers would, some of them, think about becoming certified in some kind of therapy where they could, again, do the combination work. I have several therapists that I have that are students of mine who I have then, long-term students, who I have then referred other students to. And I have found that to be a wonderful relationship for all of us, and that has worked very well for everyone. And
yeah.
And I wish that there was more of that. But the Alexander technique is such an experiential thing that therapists, although they may say they understand the principles, until they've actually worked with those principles themselves from an Alexander point of view, they don't really know how it could be useful. But once they have, then I think that there's a lot of possibility in that realm.
I'm struck as someone 3 days from graduating from a Alexander training program, how much emotional need or is attached to muscular tension, that the people have kind of armored themselves to deal with life. How do you explore with a student when you sense that they have an emotional commitment to their muscular tension? How do you deal with that?
I deal with it in context of the lesson. I'm thinking right now of, I also teach groups a lot, young people, college age, and some of them are attached to their ways of being and understanding themselves. Even more so, I think, than people coming in for pain, who may be more willing to open up. Mm-hmm. It so depends on the individual and how it expresses that I'm not sure how to answer the question. Can you ask me the question again? This question.
I've become fascinated the past couple of months by the emotional need that many people have for some of their muscular tension. That is kind of, I assume that the muscular tension has helped them get through very difficult things. And I almost want to ask if there's a story behind their muscular tension. And I almost want to ask, what would you face if you let it go? Go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing is, they don't know they're attached to it. So you can't just jump in there and ask them. In fact, they might not even know they have it. So I wouldn't then jump in there and say, hey, what's the story behind this? In fact, I would never do that. I let them discover for themselves that, first of all, they have muscular tension. Second of all, wow, that's a lot of muscular tension I have. Wow, I even have it when I talk, when I breathe, when I, whatever it is. And then, so it's important, I think, that they discover that, and that is one of the most important things they are discovering in beginning lessons. And then it's important that they find out if they want to undo that. And I would say that some people come for lessons so that they will improve their tennis game, for instance, and get out of back pain. Let's say somebody has, or a shoulder pain and tennis. So this person may or may not allow himself to change very much emotionally, but may improve the tennis game by releasing certain aspects of the head-neck-back relationship, getting more coordinated, all of that. And the tennis player may just go, wow, this is incredible work, and all of a sudden shift into the tennis game gets better, but really the work is undoing layers and layers of extra holding and armoring, as you called it, and, years of putting something in the way of relating to other people and the world and oneself. That kind of thing.
How did the Alexander technique affect the way you related to yourself and to other people?
Well, it's quite a huge transformation, but I think the transformation takes place over so long, years. I would say that I'm much kinder to myself and therefore to others. I'm much easier, which is not to say that I lack some of that sort of type A, go, get things done and, do 5 million things in 2 days. I do still have those patterns that I can even enjoy, if I have a lot going on. And I really, for instance, if I go to New York for a business trip and I want to go to the museum and I want to see my friends and I want to go to the Alexander conference and I want to take 3 dance classes over at this place on the other side of town, I don't necessarily say to myself, well, I'm not going to do all those things because now I move slowly and with ease. I might go for it and move quickly with ease and sometimes even get a little tense in the process. Maybe next year I might say, I'm going to skip 3 of those things and I'm going to just move very spaciously and through New York City and, watch everybody else go running around like little, like how it looks when you're on the street of New York. So yeah. I think that there's a way that fundamentally I have a different understanding of my own priorities and my own sense of self. So that, of course, it affects my relationships. I'm much more able to listen and be with other people. And I think that the whole thing that I talk about a lot in lessons is coming into a different state of being or a different relationship with yourself then allows you to have a different kind, a more choiceful relationship with others. And in a lesson, that relationship is the student and myself. And in the environment, in the larger environment as well. So I often distinguish or sort of categorize the three: self, other, environment, and encourage people in a lesson to be with and allow all those relationships in at the same time. So that's one way that I teach the expanded field of attention, is clearly focusing on self, other, environment.
How did the Alexander technique affect your love of reading and of English literature in particular?
Well, I've been a reader. I was just probably a reader before I was going to be a ballerina. So I'm an avid reader, as I have always been. And the Alexander technique has actually made me more interested in science. I'm particularly interested in neuroscience and kind of biology and neurology and psychology, the connections that consciousness. There's a lot out there, right? A lot of people making a lot of new discoveries that may not be so new for us as Alexander teachers, but that are at least scientifically proven now. So that's good. The plasticity of the brain and all that.
Yeah. So how did you get a teaching practice off the ground after you graduated?
The first part was when I very first started teaching, I was still working. I was a book buyer at a company that had several stores. And I would say that was really almost impossible for me to focus on the two things. So while I could have a part-time private practice, it was just kind of word of mouth. There wasn't a lot that I did at that time. So right about at the time I graduated, in fact, a month after, I got married. And after we got married and a few months after that, I quit my job, my day job, and I started my private practice. So I had some space and some time to do it. That is, I gave myself kind of a marketing, 3 months of marketing, and I got a couple of books about, building a practice and being an independent, I think it was an independent contractor kind of book. Gosh, I wish I could remember the name of that one book was really helpful. I've actually loaned it to a bunch of Alexander teachers. It might come to me in the conversation. So I went through the book and I did all the things, and I made flyers, and I got a website, and I did I did some writing, and I visited centers of influence. That is, I think that's from that book. Somebody who is important in their field, in your kind of town. So if I went to an acupuncturist who had a good practice, and I did a trade with them, or at least I gave them a sort of informational spiel with a little folder. I did that a lot, and I really spent several hours a day doing this, and as well as teaching. And so I was either lucky or it was a good time. It wasn't a great time in the economy, actually, but anyway, 2001. But so within 3 months, I did have a private practice that I said to myself was, okay, that was what I was going for. I had between 15 and 20 students a week, and that was my kind of what I had wanted to do. So for me, just doing that footwork worked. And And since then, I've had about that amount of students, or at the moment when I have a very busy schedule at the Academy of Art University where I teach the classes for the in the actor training program, I have about a half of a practice. So I have more like 10 students a week, and I have a lot of hours over there. So it depends. It sort of flows back and forth as depending on my schedule at the Academy of Art. And the Academy of Art University, I started out teaching just a class called Movement 1, and it was just supposed to be basic movement with the Alexander technique kind of in the background. And in the last couple of years, I've been with them for about 6 or 7 years, and I've developed a class. Now someone else does Movement 1, and I take them at their second year, and the class is called Body Awareness and the Conscious Actor. So that's a great opportunity to teach these young people awareness and being conscious, and they learn the Alexander technique in group as much as possible, and they each have 2 private lessons during the semester. Thank God they have that. And yeah, so that is working out for me. That's working out really well, sort of combining the 2, private practice and working at an institution.
What year did you graduate from your training?
What year? 2001.
And you got a practice going in 3 months.
Well, I didn't do it until the new year, so it was probably 2002 that I was actually starting January, February, March, yes. Yeah. But like I said, I didn't have another job. I was able to quit my job and spend the hours that I would normally be at my job actually doing the footwork that requires practice, requires that sort of marketing and business and, putting what today would be blogging or, creating a Facebook page and linking it with your Twitter feed and, I don't know, writing. I mean, seems like that's what you have a lot of that going on. So, but I think that it's also true that whatever you feel really comfortable in, it may be important to move in the direction that you don't feel comfortable in. For instance, I was not comfortable speaking in front of groups and going to let's say a business women's network event and having the little 2-minute spiel that they let you have if you're a new person who might join their network or something, or speaking at a health forum kind of thing. I didn't create those situations for myself as much, but I think that it was important for me to do those things. Because if you just do the things that you find kind of easy and fun, like for me that would be writing, it doesn't charge the energy up in the air or something. I don't know. The other thing that I have found is that it seems like a strange kind of woo-woo Berkeley thing, but whenever I put energy into marketing, even if it's something like as traditional as writing flyers and putting them around in the dance centers, I will have some more students soon after that. They may not have even seen the flyers. They may never even go to the dance centers. But it's like doing something, putting some energy out there somehow seems to create the students. So I don't know about that, but I've come to trust it. So I often, when I need to build my practice, I just kind of give myself several hours and do some kind of work on it.
Now, I first heard about you when a friend sent me a link to the podcast interview you did with Robert Rickover about sexuality and the Alexander technique. And not many teachers speak about that publicly, am I right?
Well, I don't know that they've been asked, but probably not. I mean, Alexander teachers, I think traditionally have been a little bit conservative. But now we're in a different generation, so I think that's becoming less and less. So, but I'm able to speak about it because of my work in sex education and my partner's work in sex education. So we already have a whole discourse of sex education that we come from. So it's not as challenging for me as it might be for somebody who hasn't been in that field before. Alexander
teachers do seem to be fairly conservative about the technique. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the sociology of Alexander teachers.
Well, I think it's probably similar to many groups of smaller or not even smaller, larger groups of people. I hear that in Aikido or a martial art like that, there are similar issues of lineage and who does it right and who doesn't do it right. In fact, much more severe than in our Alexander world. I think, like I said, the new generation is much more open. And once you get out of school, you're no longer sort of beholden to the school's philosophy, and you can really explore. And I've done that a lot. I'm a member of ATI as well as AMSAT, and I've attended their conferences and made friends with some of our colleagues because they are our colleagues, and I really enjoy that organization. They're very different in the way they run their organization, AMSAT, but it's basically we're teaching the same work. And within AMSAT, we have different styles as well. And I think I've been able to learn. I'm perhaps by being trained by Frank, who was very open also and had rather an eclectic history of study himself. And you're coming from that lineage also, right?
Yes. Yes.
And with Michael Frederick and people who are more open to, less closed to the sort of very, very purist way that must be like how it was when Alexander was alive, which is now, significant time ago.
What is the difference between how ATI and AMSAT function? Is there a different ethos?
Well, I think it's a very big difference, and I'm not sure that I would be able to articulate it in the way that either organization would approve of. I mean, especially AMSAT, because they're the ones who are gung-ho about approving things. I guess I would say that, well, AMSAT goes by the Roberts Rules of Order, right? And everything is very, how would we call that? It would be, very, very orderly and very specific, and how motions get passed and how things happen. And in the past, it's taken a long time to get things done, partly because of that structure. ATI is much more kind of the opposite. They have big conversations, big dialogues that are facilitated with a nonviolent communication specialist, and they're very interested in speaking to each other with a lot of regard and respect. And they're interested in consensus which is not necessarily possible. They're smaller organizations, so it's more possible for them to reach consensus. I mean, they're generally warmer and friendlier and, sort of fuzzier. And I think that's partly due to the small nature of the organization, and it's partly due to that they are kind of the stepchild of AMSAT. They broke off, and they wanted to do things with the Alexander principles. They wanted to have their organization run with the Alexander principles. And maybe AMSAT might, some people on the board might say that they too are working towards that, but the structure of the organization is much more hierarchical and rigid and the traditional kind of institutional structure, whereas ATI really is exploring new, different ways of being a group, a big organization.
Yeah, thank you. That was good. Do your peers complain about having a lack of pupils? Do they turn to you for advice? What do you notice in this arena?
My peers here in the Bay Area, I think that it depends on which peers, I guess. Some of my colleagues are really busy and have enough work. Trying to think if there's somebody who is only doing, a newer teacher like myself or under 10 years, only doing the Alexander technique in a private practice. I think that's the most difficult thing. I think that once you get into a situation where you do have some institutional support and you can count on either classes or a structure where a school is kind of getting you students regularly, or a health club or a university like center. So once you have something institutional that is supporting you, I think it's much easier. Just private practice, trying to think of who's doing that, and I think it's hard. I think I think a lot of it depends on one's personality, actually, and one's sort of business savvy. So I think when you have somebody like Amira, who you've done an interview with, right? You have business savvy from her past, and you have very perky personality, and so you have a great combination of perky business going on.
Yes.
So there's a lot of energy, a lot of vitality that comes across in her marketing. Like, that's how she does her marketing, and and she's also very open to exploring different avenues. And so even though she went to a school that was kind of rigid as far as how it's supposed to be taught, afterwards she was really said, well, wait a second, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try that. And so that's the thing is that when you're a teacher, you have to have either some business training, which if you don't have in your past, you have to kind of go get somewhere. And or you have to have a gregarious personality, which if you don't have, you have to just develop a little bit. Maybe not gregarious, but less introverted. I don't think of myself as a gregarious, perky person at all, so my website and my style is going to be different than Amira's. But I found that it was important for me not to just sit in my room and write things. But I think there's a certain amount of business principles or understanding of how an independent private practice person works that one has to go and get from somewhere. I actually hired a coach after maybe 3 years, and I had this big break after, I can't remember what happened. We bought a house, we moved, and I felt like I was always feeling bad every time somebody said, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "I teach the Alexander Technique," and they'd say, "What's that?" And I would say, "Well, it's a body education awareness system. It's really about education." I would just go blah, 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 and their eyes would glaze over. And I was so done with that little introduction that I gave and how it would never work and how I never knew how to get to the next step. And I always made their eyes glaze over. So anyway, I hired a business coach that came recommended from a friend, and she was great. I had phone conversations with her for about 6 months, and I learned a lot from her about just how to speak to people, just directly and simply, and meet them where they are, and all of the things that come with years of experience. But I just got it a little sooner by doing that with her.
So how did you learn to speak about the technique in a way that's more effective with people who are not aware of the technique?
How did I learn? I think it was a lot of practicing, and she would give me, exercises like telling people about my latest success with a student, or she would make me take my whole long paragraph and, write it in one sentence and then change it up for different people, different audiences. Again, a lot of footwork. Footwork meaning also speaking with people and actually practicing. And now I've been doing that. I think with experience there does come a comfortable kind of way about you when you have had a lot of success with students. And I do see that over time with teachers. And I don't know what happens if the teacher doesn't have success. I guess they go on to do something else. They're not successful Alexander teachers. But if you're a success in that your students get better and your students are happy, then one just gets more comfortable with just talking about it. And I find here's a little thing that I found in my first year, that just a little tidbit for you as you're graduating, that it's actually not about me or you or how good we are as teachers, because obviously I'm a better teacher now than I was when I graduated. It's not about that. It's just teaching the principles. And if you just stick with the principles, it is amazing how people change and grow and are thrilled. They're just thrilled. So even if you think to yourself, "Oh, I didn't do very good on that lesson," you've done an amazing thing just because you've taken 3 years to study this or longer, and you have these principles that you can impart. And that's just an amazing thing that works despite us. Yeah.
What are some of the effective ways that you have found to talk about the technique with newcomers?
Well, with somebody who's already in the door, I'm going to meet them where they are, in that I'm going to find out what their concerns are, and I'm going to address those concerns. In the first lesson, I may address them by doing a 20-minute lie down and standing and sitting in a chair, but I will be addressing those concerns, even if not directly in their view. If somebody's not at my studio and they're expressing interest, again, I meet them where they are, discuss with them how the Alexander Technique could be of benefit to them. And if somebody is just asking me what I do, I will say, depending on who they are and what context they're asking me this in, a variety of things. But I won't start out by saying I'm an Alexander technique teacher, because that's just well, what's that? And then I have to do that horrible sentence. But I don't actually ever do the horrible sentence. If I make a mistake and I say, well, I teach the Alexander technique, and they say, oh, what's that? Then I'll say something like, well, it depends on where it is, right? So if it's some party that I don't even know anybody and I'm just randomly there and with a friend of mine, I might say, well, it teaches you about how to use your body like a musician. You know how a musician has their instrument, their violin? Well, they themselves are also an instrument. So it teaches them how to use themselves with their instrument. I'll come up with some example like that. Or it teaches you how to change habits from habits of tension and distraction and contraction into habits of more ease and spaciousness in your daily life. Or, like just lots of different things that I might go to. If you talk about contraction and ease and spaciousness, that is actually something really important that people can understand, but not necessarily the very first thing, because they don't know they're contracted, right? Unless you just say, well, you can relieve stress by releasing your tension. Then people are like, oh, yeah, I need that. So then I might say, yeah, so I work with people who have RSI and or some kind of repetitive stress issues from working at a computer for days on end. And we all sit at computers, and most of us sit like this. And then I'll give a little demonstration, and they'll say, oh, yeah, that's how I sit. And then I'll say, well, we learn to sit into balance and let the right part of the body support the right things, and everything becomes a little bit easier, and you don't stress your body in undue ways. And anyway, I try to be a little bit more everyday about it and less precious.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
say that it's a body-mind educational method that works with your psychophysical organism, and it's too much. It gets to be too much. I think even mind-body technique, I often have used that in the past, and when I say that, I find that people say, oh, like yoga, oh, like Pilates, oh, and then I will say, instead of saying no, I'll say, well, yes, yoga works with, easier movement and balance, and a lot of yoga teachers are also interested in quieting the whole nervous system. And so in that way, we do that. But we do it in a studio with your daily activities. It's not like you go to a class and learn these postures. It's more that we're working with those things in the daily actions that you do.
Do you think the technique can ever be as popular as yoga?
Well, I don't think it will ever be as popular as yoga in America unless we have a huge transformational cultural psychic shift. But I do think that it could be far more popular than it is, and it should be. I mean, the amount of misinformation that people are coming to our studios with is really mind-boggling, given how much science, how much knowledge we have. The fact that sort of simple postural and movement principles are so left out of education and left out of health and medicine training. It seems the more I teach, the more I just find how absurd it is. But I don't see it in the same kind of grouping as Pilates or yoga or the kind of thing where you go to a class and you learn a series of exercises. So and there's a series of things to do, like we Americans, we really like that. here's my exercise plan, and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do these 10 things, and then I'm going to see these results. I think because it's so much more about your thinking and your undoing, I think it's not likely to become a yoga fad. And that's okay with me now. I actually have decided and come to that it isn't for everybody, actually. And although I wish that some of the basic information was out there for everybody, the actual work, the actual practice of awareness, inhibition, and direction is not for everybody.
Have you lost many students when they realize how much work is involved in pursuing the technique?
No, I don't think that's happened to me. If I've lost a student, I don't know why very often, but I don't lose them so much like they just disappear, so much as something happens in their life after they've come to me once or twice and they've not sort of gotten into it far enough. Occasionally that will happen. But mostly if I have a student who comes, they're going to stay for a while. I don't usually have people who just come once. And if they do, I think there's a lot of different things that have happened. You know, some people have been trying out teachers and maybe have gone to someone else, or some people have I don't know. It doesn't happen that often, so I should think about it, though, so that I can answer that question with more clarity.
Do you use the traditional forbidding Alexander language, such as inhibition and stop and say no?
I don't say stop and say no a lot, but I do talk about inhibition, and I have handouts, so I have practically a book that somebody will get over a series of even 10 lessons. There's a lot of reading, and my handout for the inhibition handout says inhibition of automatic habit, and I will put those things together, those words together, so that it's clear that you're inhibiting something that is happening automatically without you thinking about it. Because otherwise the word inhibition gets mixed up with the Freudian version. And I don't, it depends on the student how much I'm going to use that language. And sometimes I use it a lot because they're a long-term Alexander student and they've read all the handouts and they have read book or two, and sometimes I won't use it very much at all. But I do want them to understand the actual language. And I do actually need my students at the Academy of Arts to understand awareness, inhibition, and direction, because in their next movement class, it's a class in which they will also be doing Alexander, and they will be expected to know the mental direction, and they will be expected to understand that inhibition means to pause and to not do what you automatically do. So I do, but in context, different with different people. I wouldn't do it at all as a workshop in like an hour or two introductory workshop. I don't think I would use inhibition or direction either.
So do you simply teach the way you were taught the technique, or have you brought something unique to you to your practice?
Well, we all bring something unique to us, right? Because we're all different. So even if you start out training, teaching the way you think you're teaching the way that, so-and-so teaches. Like, I'm going to model my class after the way Rome gave her lessons. I don't I don't think that really happens, and I think it's really, in some ways, lovely in the beginning for me to think, or even now, for me to think, well, what would Rome do here? Or how would Simone handle that? You know, but ultimately, I have to have my own way of teaching and being with students, and it's going to be different than theirs. So I think you can model yourself after several or one teacher, but ultimately you will have become your own teacher. And I'm personally very interested in activities. I'm very interested in more complicating the issues, like in speaking or moving, or speaking and moving together, or playing the violin while singing and doing a jig. You know, like the more complicated, the more fun, I think. And just find ways to work with ourselves in the best way possible while doing the most challenging things. I think that's what the technique is about. And I'm also somebody who's not, I don't believe in saying, oh, no, you shouldn't wear high heels, or, oh, no, you shouldn't, I don't know, go to the gym, or, oh, no, it's bad to, whatever. Some of the, in the past, Alexander teachers have thought are bad. High heels, it's like playing a violin. Neither of them are exactly ergonomic. So let's just accept that and move on with it. And how to best use ourselves, given the choices we're making. So I'm, I would say that I'm more activity-oriented than how I was taught in the beginning. I'm also much more open to dealing with, discussing, allowing emotional issues and or trauma into lessons, and to allow those things to be worked with in lessons, much more than how I was taught.
Can you say anything about how you work with trauma?
Well, that's such a huge subject, and I don't know. But I can say that when I first started teaching, I had a couple of students who had clearly had trauma in their background. One was an injury-related trauma. It was a car accident, I think, and the student had a very, very bad experience with hospitals and doctors during all of this recovery or lack of recovery for several years. And I was the first person she came to after, I don't even remember the details, but the situation was she basically fell apart and was just crying and crying and crying on my Alexander table, and I was in my first year of teaching, and I didn't have any idea what to do except to just be with her and let her cry and be, a gentle witness, offer her Kleenex, tell her that she could cry if she, until she needed to, and stick with awareness of her sensations, and at some point work on coming to breathing easier, softer. Maybe I had the idea of direction into softness. I don't remember, but I do remember thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do if this happens? And so I signed myself up for a trauma workshop. And I went to several of this. We have somebody in the Bay Area here, Kathy Kane, who has done a lot of somatic experiencing, the Michael Levine work.
Yeah.
He's the guy who wrote, oh gosh, I forget the name. But anyway, there's a whole discourse and work going on in that somatic experiencing world. And her work also combined orthobionomy and cranial sacral and, I don't know, a bunch of things. And I went to several of her workshops, and I learned a lot about how you can see it, and how you can either address it or not address it. And in my case, sometimes it's to not address it if it's going to be beyond my capacity. But just being able to see it and to understand what's happening and how one could work with it on the edge of it. So to acknowledge it to the student, to perhaps suggest something else for them, like possibly a therapist or another person from this somatic experiencing work, or to be willing to go there a little bit with them. So that's what I did. I had that experience, and I basically, I think, intuitively did something that worked out, and then I got some training, which was, a couple weekend workshops over, I've maybe done 3 or 4 with her over several years. And now I'm much more comfortable in that kind of work. So I seem to draw people who need it. Again, not out of any intention or even any thing that's written about me or my work, but some people seem to come to me who want to do that kind of work, or they discover that they're open to that while working.
Is there anything that I should ask you about that I have not asked you about?
Oh gosh, a long conversation, so I feel like Chatty Cathy here. Have I said that I think it's really important to have a professional studio?
No.
I do think that the more that the Alexander community becomes professional, the better for us and for the profession. I mean, it is a profession. One could also say it's an art, and certainly the very purist people are sort of lean towards it's okay to have the students in your home, and it's an art that you develop over years and years, and you shouldn't ever market. They should just come to you. And then there's the opposite end of the spectrum, which is you really have to have everything be very, very professional, and you are supposed to market, and you are supposed to make a living, and you are supposed to be able to to move in the world of the yoga teachers and the chiropractors and the doctors and all of that. And I'm much more to that end, and I wish that we were a little bit more in our training geared towards that, towards becoming more, I guess, able to converse with the people who are going to be our colleagues, who are going to be teamed with because of our students' situations. So some of us have the performing arts, but we all have the people in pain. So we all need to be able to, I think to a certain extent, converse in a pleasant and somewhat knowledgeable way with a physical therapist and a chiropractor and an acupuncturist and a regular old doctor. So I think that having a professional space is another aspect of that.
And do you find yourself having those conversations with the doctor and the physical therapist and the chiropractor?
Sometimes, yes. And certainly the ones that I do have a relationship with, that I have developed referrals back and forth with. So not so much about particular students, like, how's so-and-so doing? Hey, did you give her that exercise? No, not like that. But,
yeah. Okay.
But yes, people who are in my sort of circle of professionals in the area. And I still like to do trades. When I meet somebody that I feel like there's a possibility of some referral relationship, I like to either do trades or just pay for each other's work, which is actually the more professional thing to do. So I'll go and pay for somebody's, personal training. Somebody has a very particular way of doing personal training that's supposed to be, all about careful alignment and mindful work and blah, blah, blah. I'll go have a session, and I'll see for myself, well, is it? Well, it's actually not so much. So you know what? Never mind. I'm not going to refer to that person. And, we still have a nice collegial relationship, and maybe there will be some students who comes from her at some point. Ideally, of course, you go have a session, and you're like, wow, this is great. This is a person who's going to be another group, another sort of team, another part of the team. Sometimes there's people like students who have Parkinson's, for instance. So if they just have the Alexander technique, that's not enough. They have a whole situation of medications. They might have a regular acupuncturist. They might have some sort of physical therapy. They might need to go to an exercise class, and there might not be any exercise classes that are suitable for them that they know of. So that's a place where you might be able to be a help, and be part of the team.
Yeah. Okay, great. Please hang on 1 second.